It's a 1995 80 series and it had a hard life. I had spent in repairs before I left and also on the trip $15,000.
Some people might think that this setup would take forever to set up, but honestly, maximum take one person, I reckon, maybe 5 to 6 minutes.
Yeah, right.
Maximum to set up this entire trailer.
Not that it was a new vehicle, but when I bought my last Land Cruiser, it broke down on the way home.
G'day guys, welcome to another Campfire Yarns. We are finally out of lockdown down in New South Wales and we are actually in front of a real fire. We're not having any virtual beers anymore, so thank God we're finally out here outside of Wiseman's Ferry, beautiful area here. And today at my disposal I have Brenno, and I'm going to pick his brain on a couple of questions that you guys have asked, but also a couple that I want to know about planning and executing the big lap around Australia. And to my right here I've also got my good mate Cahn, who's a 12 volt guru, as you guys know. So I'm going to be asking him a bunch of questions on your behalf, but again, some questions that I want to ask for my own trip that I want to do one day in the future. So let's kick things off with Brenno.
Righto, mate. I'll give all the viewers at home a little bit of a background. So probably about 5 or 6 years ago, I did a trip around Australia, did the hot lap, did about 10 months on the road, 42,000 kilometers in a busted old 80 series. I'm open, I'm ready to answer, so you fire away.
Okay, beautiful. So my first question that I'm sure everyone's curious about is how the heck do you start to even think about budgeting for a trip of that magnitude?
It is the $1 million question, literally.
Yeah.
Okay, so there's this generally held wisdom that says when you do a big trip around Australia, the rough budget you should work to is $1,000 a week.
Right.
Sounds like a lot depending on if you've got a year off. $52,000 is a lot of money. That is kind of the everything all-inclusive, your diesel, your petrol, whatever it is, your campsite fees, your tourist attractions, your food, all that sort of stuff. That's sort of like an upper end of the scale. If you had the money and you'd saved, or you sold your house or whatever you want to do, you're doing the dream trip of a lifetime, if you had $1,000 a week, you would do everything you could do around Australia. And by that I mean, you'd get up to the Kimberley and you'd be able to take those helicopter rides out over the horizontal falls. You'd be able to go up to the Cape and not just go do the teletrack, but hop on a croc boat tour and go and see a croc. I reckon you could do it for about half that if money was the concern. It might limit a little bit how far you can drive, because out of your budget, you're going to find that fuel is your biggest cost. One way or another, if you want to drive, you've got to put fuel in your car. You can save money in other ways. Free camping, you can free camp right around Australia, or national park camp or anything like that. You could cut your accommodation bill down by hundreds of dollars a week if you free camped as much as possible. And that's probably where your advice comes in, Cahn, because part of free camping as much as possible is setting up a vehicle and a 12 volt system to allow you to free camp.
Yeah, that's correct. And I get a lot of questions about this all the time. What setup do I specifically need? And that's a really hard question to answer. If I'm helping someone one-on-one, which I've done a fair bit of, it's a lot simpler because you can actually talk to them about the vehicle they have, the type of camping they want to do, and realistically how much driving they expect to do. Because these days with DC-DC chargers, you're charging your battery while you're driving. So if you can bank on the fact that you're going to be driving a couple of hours every couple of days, you can pretty reliably know that your batteries are going to be charged up. If you're the sort of person who's going to stay somewhere for a week or two at a time, that's when you really need to start thinking about solar power. And these days it's not hard. You can get permanent solar on your roof and portable solar, which covers you if you want to camp in the shade and you don't have any sun on your solar on your roof. You can actually set up your portable blanket out in the sun, take advantage of that. Alternatively, if you don't have any shade and your vehicle's set up there, it's always charging, you've always got sun. So there's so many options these days. Really, you've got to calculate how many things are going to be drawing power. These days with 12 volt fridges and all this sort of stuff, they don't use as much power as you'd expect. Okay. So it's worth looking at the specs of the products and being realistic. A lot of the time you get an average figure. Say a fridge might be tested at a certain temperature. Some fridges are tested at like 25 degrees Celsius at ambient temperature. And if you're in Australia, you're very rarely going to get that sort of temperature,
Up the top end, it could be another 20 degrees ambient temperature.
Exactly
easily.
right. So be realistic and have a look at that, because some brands are a bit sneaky with their marketing.
Okay.
The setup that I had an old 80 series cruiser and a camper trailer. I had 2 batteries in the back of the 80 series and 2 batteries in the camper trailer, solar panel up on the roof rack. And I'll tell you, the one thing that I found the most useful of anything was a 240 volt battery charger. If your batteries get super flat, there's nothing as good as being able to pull into a bush caravan park somewhere, paying for a powered site for the night. You plug them in and the next morning you're back up to, it's like a get out of jail free card, you're back up to 100% again.
And just while I think about it, if you guys out there do want a bit of help with your 12 volt setup and you are planning a big trip, throw a comment down below and I'll get back to you and do my best to help you out for your exact situation.
That's a good offer.
Yeah.
I'm going to be the first.
I'm going to be busy.
I'm going to be the first. All right, so that's budgeting. What else, my man?
So the next thing I wanted to ask you is vehicle setups. Now I know you've already touched on your 80 series, but can you talk us through your specific vehicle setup, how you had it set up, and if you could change anything about that setup after you got back from your big trip, what would it be?
Everything. So this is a little still painful to talk about. If I could have changed anything, I would have gone around Australia in a more modern vehicle. I'm not saying something brand new, but when I left, it was a 1995 80 series and it had just shy of 400,000 kilometers on the clock, and they weren't easy kilometers. It had had a hard life. I was towing a camper trailer as well, and I worked it out when I came back. I had spent in not accessories, not modifications, repairs before I left and also on the trip, $15,000.
15 grand.
It literally broke me. I ended up coming back from the trip probably about 2 months early because I just ran out of money. And the reason that I went around in that car was because it was the one that I had, and I really didn't want the expense of buying something new and having a vehicle repayment while I was on the road. But wisdom in hindsight, I would do it definitely in a four-wheel drive if I had the choice again. But that said, if there's anyone out there watching, if you've got an SUV, if you've got a van, and that's what you've got, then don't put it off, just do it. Do it in whatever you've got, as long as it's mechanically reliable. That was the biggest thing that I learned.
I wanted to say something as well, just to consider, and that is if you're buying a second-hand vehicle, even if it's relatively new and appears to be looked after, buy it with enough time that you can drive it and get to know the vehicle a little bit before you take it. Not that it was a new vehicle, but when I bought my last Land Cruiser, it broke down on the way home. You know what I mean? Like,
Mate, this isn't our most unreliable four-wheel drive story. We already did that one.
I had that conversation.
I know, but it's something to consider. Give it a good once-over, take it to a mechanic and that sort of thing. Make sure it's in good nick before you trek off on this giant trip.
Right.
Righto. Let's talk camping setup.
Yeah.
Look, in terms of camping setups and what sort of camping gear to take, I think the biggest thing is it needs to be easy. Again, if I was doing it tomorrow, I'd take this thing right here, to be honest. Put a rooftop tent on this and I would tow this. You've towed that thing in some gnarly terrain. It goes anywhere you pretty much want to tow it.
And I've heard that from multiple people too. Like, some people might think that this setup would take forever to set up, but honestly, when we pulled up today, if we had a rooftop tent on it, it would maximum take one person, I reckon, maybe 5 to 6 minutes.
Yeah, right.
Maximum to set up this entire trailer. And you've got a full kitchen here, you've got the fridge, pantry, plus all the storage and a storage drawer in the back.
And unfortunately, I didn't have this available when I did the trip around Australia. Had I would have taken it every single day of the week, but it is what it is. Vehicle modifications.
Right, yeah.
So let's talk that. We touched on it a moment ago, but look, nothing more than, it's more about it being reliable than it being tough. And by that I mean a set of good all-terrain tyres at a minimum, proper light truck construction.
Probably ties in a little bit with being realistic about what you're intending to do as well, particularly about tyres. Of the 42,000 Ks you did, a fair whack of them would have had to have been on tarmac.
Oh yeah, honestly, I would say 85% would have been.
And that's exactly what you got to think about too, is if you go out and buy the most aggressive muddies you can, it's not going to handle well, it's not going to give you the confidence on road, and it's a big trip. A lot of little things could happen, so get tyres that are going to suit the actual full driving or driving that you're doing.
Yep. And if you guys can hear something in the background, we've got the locals hanging around. I kid you not.
A good one. Okay, so that almost rounds it out for the questions that I wanted to ask. I do have a big long list, but we're on a limited time frame here, so I'm going to jump over to some viewers' questions here. Okay, so first on the list is a bloke called Sean Matthews, and his question is, we've already covered it, but how much would you budget for, say, 12 months for one person and for two people? Obviously not including any work you pick up around the country. I know fuel varies, but an average figure.
Yeah, so we obviously already talked about that. I think, Sean, $1,000 at the upper limit, $500 if you're doing it tight.
Okay.
And you went with two people, Brenno?
Yes.
So that'd $500 would cover two?
Yeah, absolutely. But I think the biggest expense is your diesel or your petrol, whatever it is. As much as anything, you'll save a bit of money if you're only one person's food, but it won't be a huge amount.
Okay, cool. Next question, I think Bormy 461, Any tips for beating the crowds and grey nomads? Apart from getting further out bush, insert a whole bunch of emojis.
Okay, so yes, the short answer is try and be at the places that they aren't. And that sounds obvious, but it means avoiding all the most popular places in peak holiday season, school holidays and that sort of stuff. If you try and go up to the Cape, I know you said grey nomads, but this is talking about tourists in general. If you try and go up and do the Cape in the winter school holidays, you're gonna have a very, very busy time like you were up on Bribey Island or Double Island Point in the middle of summer. There's certain places that you need to be at certain times of the year, such as the Kimberley, all those beautiful places like El Cuestro, well, they shut over the wet season through summer. You obviously don't want to be there then because you're not going to see any of it. Right. If it was me and I was leaving from one of the East Coast major cities, I'd try and leave somewhere around March, April, plod my way up the East Coast, and then be across the top end of Australia during winter. Yeah, okay, it is grey nomad season up there, but it is what it is. And then that way, I guess, if you are up at the top end of Australia during winter, then you've got perfect weather right across there. It also times really well to come down the west coast, and by summer, you're down in southwest WA, so that sort of works quite well.
Okay, sweet. And that actually ties into the next question I've got here from Jacopo Basello. So I apologize if I'm getting your name wrong there, mate. But how many weeks/months would you need to properly do the West Coast, Perth to Darwin?
Ooh, how long's a piece of string? Look, I would say 2 months would cover you very nicely.
Right.
Depends how far you want to wander off the beaten trail, because you've got beautiful places like Karijini National Park that's, inland, it's not necessarily on the coast. I think around about 2 months.
Okay, so for the next question, we've got David Cowan. And his question is, traveling solo, is it viable and a good idea?
Very, very good question. It can be very intimidating sitting at home, having a few beers and trying to plan out a trip around Australia and thinking it's a big old country. But the funny thing is, doing a big trip is no different to doing a small trip, just night after night after night. If you can do a trip that lasts for 3 or 4 nights, you can do a trip around Australia. Yep. Because you're not out in the middle of the Simpson Desert for 8 weeks at a time. You're going to go through towns, you're going to be able to restock, you're going to meet people on the road. Australia is full of people traveling and seeing Australia. Right. Look, if you had someone to do it with, absolutely. If you're doing it solo, you will be able to do it, no dramas in the world. I wouldn't let that stop you.
Okay, so the next one we've already touched on a little bit, but it's definitely worth asking anyway. From Adrian Hardiman. Again, sorry if I'm pronouncing that wrong. My partner and I plan on doing a coastal lap around Oz for 1 year, going inland occasionally. We can't decide if we should get a van or a four-wheel drive. We understand both have a lot of different benefits. I guess my question is, what is best to do the lap in? Reliability and safety being some of our biggest concerns.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so look, you guys are looking at buying a car. Look, if it was me and I had the choice of a van or a four-wheel drive to drive around Australia, I would definitely choose a four-wheel drive. It just opens up so many more opportunities. That said, if I already had a van, then I would take the van. You could drive around Australia without ever leaving the blacktop if you wanted to do that. I'd probably still put a set of good all-terrain light truck tyres on it. Doesn't have to be huge, doesn't have to be lifted or anything like that. Just something that you could then go and drive. You could do the Gibb River Road in it, no dramas in the world. And on that topic, keep an eye out on our channel, because very soon I'm going to bring you guys a video that I'm very excited to bring you guys. You guys have seen a little sneak peek of my lockdown project. I've just finished building my dream camper van and it's come up cool and I can't wait to show it to you guys. So sorry, I digressed there. But yes, look, the answer is do it in what you've got, but if you have a choice, I would choose a four-wheel drive every day of the week.
Okay, so the next one is from a bloke called Thomas Woodhouse. Water storage, how much and how to access easily?
Okay, yeah, easy question to answer. Around about 100 litres of water storage in your vehicle at any one time, and in particular if you can spread it across a couple of different storage options. That way, if you do have a leak, you won't lose all your water at once. I would aim for something like a 60 litre water bladder or a water tank, something like that. And it could be as simple as then just another couple of jerry cans of water that you just have in the back of the car as well. In terms of accessing water, well, that's super easy. Just about every town out there has an RV dump point, but they also have water fill stations. Right. So just carry a food grade water hose and all the fittings for it, and you'll be able to top your water up as you travel. Okay, so the next question is from Dan Fish. Info regarding bringing dogs on your trip. Yes. Look, it's a tricky one. If you couldn't imagine doing the trip around Australia without your pup, then take your pup. Right. But it's going to limit where you go. can't take them into national parks, and that's another conversation, whether it's right or wrong, for another day. Then also the other thing that seriously needs consideration is ticks. Look, if it was me and I had the option to leave with my folks or my brother or my mate or something like that, even for part of the trip, probably do that.
So unfortunately, that's all we have time for. I'm sure we could sit here and talk for hours about this, but if you guys want to ask any more questions, go ahead and leave them in the comment section down below. We'll try our best to get back to every single one of you. And if you guys are debating on petrol versus diesel, Brenno has actually done a really good video on that exact subject, and he takes you through every single aspect of it, benefits, downfalls of each one. So go ahead and click on that and enjoy.